All right, so the second half of the semester, we're going to be talking about wastewater treatment. So the first thing that we need to do is exactly what we did for drinking water treatment and take a look at wastewater quality and composition so that we understand what we're treating our wastewater for, or moved on from drinking water. So two concepts that you need to know when it comes to wastewater. So wastewater quality, it refers to those different parameters that are present in wastewater that scientists and engineers need to be aware of. So just like water quality, we talk about things like turbidity and dissolved oxygen and temperature. Wastewater, we're going to talk about very similar things, but we tend to talk about things like TSS, total suspended solids, and BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, and other parameters as well. So there's different parameters that we need to be aware of. The other thing that we need to talk about a little bit more with wastewater is composition. So with drinking water, our source came from one location, but with wastewater, our wastewater comes from multiple locations. It comes from homes, it comes from businesses. And so composition is going to refer to where it comes from and what the quality is from that location as a whole and what it contributes to wastewater. So when we talk about quality and composition, quality tells us what processes are needed to treat specific parameters. So just like with drinking water treatment, many times we design our treatment units specific to whatever contaminant we're removing. Same idea with wastewater quality. We want to remove specific parameters. So the parameters that are in the wastewater are going to tell us what we need to do in terms of treatment. So an example of this would be the removal of biochemical oxygen demand, BOD, with aerobic digestion. We'll talk about what that all means as we go through. Composition is going to tell us more about flow rate, so how much wastewater needs to be treated each day, and it's also going to tell us who is adding the most to wastewater. So we need to be aware of what industrial businesses might be in the area because they may add more total solids, they may add more oxygen demand to the system. And so knowing composition is really going to help us predict peaks in parameters. So just like we had a peaking factor in the past, we're going to have the same kind of thing when it comes to wastewater. So if we go back to kind of our big diagram for this semester, we're now kind of in that bottom left half, where we have the homes, but we also have the businesses and the industry and the commercial side of things, and everybody's producing wastewater, right? So you flush the toilet, you use your laundry machine, you use washers, you have water that you use in industrial processes, and those all go to a to a wastewater plant. Got to get my head in terms of wastewater now, right? So we're contributing different components. So we're going to talk in detail about these parameters in class, but here are some key wastewater quality components that you need to be aware of. So we need to be aware of total suspended solids. There's a lot more of this in wastewater than there is in drinking water, so TSS is important. Biochemical oxygen demand is a huge one because many times our wastewater is getting discharged to a stream, a river, or the ocean, and having oxygen demand in our wastewater is going to introduce demand into whatever the receiving water is. And we can't put too much oxygen demand into receiving water. So this is a really important parameter that we regulate. Total organic carbon is also going to be important. So this tells us the total amount of kind of organics in the system. And then we also define a term COD, which is chemical oxygen demand. So you have oxygen demand related to both chemicals in the system as well as to biological components in the system. The other thing that's really unique about wastewater is that we talk a lot more about nutrients. So we talk about what we call nitrogenous compounds, so things like ammonia, ammonium, nitrate, nitrite, and total nitrogen. We also talk about phosphorus compounds, and sometimes we'll talk about potassium as well, but that one's a little bit more rare. So we tend to talk about nitrogen and phosphorus because those are going to increase the nitrogen and phosphorus content of whatever receiving water they go to. And if that receiving water is a lake or a stream, that can potentially cause what we call eutrophication, which makes the lake more nutrient dense. And a lot of times this leads to algal blooms, changes in the ecosystems, and that's something that we want to avoid. And then the other thing we need to be aware of when it comes to composition is what are our sources. So we have household sources. When you flush the toilet, when you use water fixtures, when you use showers, dishwasher, anytime you're using water in your house, that is all going to go down the drain. When it goes down to the drain, it goes all to the same place unless you have a separation system. And all of that becomes a component of the wastewater that leaves your house. We can also have industrial effluent, so we can have processing plants for all sorts of industry. We can have pulp and paper mills, we can have agricultural components, anything that you can think of with industry where they're using water, that's going to be important. And then the other one that's really important that people forget about a lot of times is what we call commercial effluent. So not everybody is home all day. We're not in COVID anymore, right? So there's a lot of commercial activity. Hotels, airports, laundromats, all of these locations have toilets and they use water, and all of the water that's been used is going to be part of that total wastewater in the system. So it's important to remember that it's not just coming from the house, it's also coming from other sources, especially in big wastewater treatment plants. And because it's coming from different sources, we tend to have a different kind of composition. So this is when we get to start talking about lovely terms throughout the semester, right? So in your toilet, you have urine, feces, toilet paper, toilet flush water, and that is what we call black water coming into this system. We also have what we call gray water. So this comes out of your dishwasher, your showers, things like that. Black water and gray water is normally combined together into what we call domestic wastewater. And then we have industrial, we have commercial, and this one's kind of interesting that also this figure also includes stormwater. So many towns don't have a specific source water treatment program, so stormwater actually gets funneled into wastewater treatment, which is really important to know, especially if you live in a rain-prone area and you have a lot of stormwater coming into your plant. So in terms of water quality, wastewater quality, I gotta get in the wastewater mindset. We're gonna have many different parameters, and we're gonna talk about each of these in depth in class, but we have kind of overall, we have organics, we have physical properties, nutrients, solids, and microbial or pathogenic components. So these are kind of the 5 big subgroups that we're gonna discuss in class. So when it comes to wastewater, these treatment plants look very similar to a drinking water facility that you would see. There's a picture in the top left that shows an aerial view of a wastewater treatment plant. And then you'll see that there are some pipes that are going into the source that have all this really brown water. It doesn't always look brown when it comes to wastewater, but that's typically how we kind of portray it. The other note that I'll make is that in the top right corner, that is actually what we call a septic tank. So this is a type of on-site wastewater treatment. So if you're a private homeowner, sometimes you could have a private well. And just like you have a private well, you can also have a private wastewater treatment system. So primarily what we're going to talk about in class is centralized wastewater treatment, but just be aware that there is what we call on-site wastewater treatment as well. So, last key concepts for this video. Wastewater treatment has 2 targets, right? We're going to ensure human health protection. We don't want humans coming in contact with wastewater. It causes all sorts of disease. It's part of the reason that sanitation is such a huge component of what NGOs are working on globally, because when people come into contact with human waste, it can make them very sick. So there's a public health protection, just as we talked about with drinking water. But the other thing that's really important here is that wastewater is often discharged to what we call a receiving water. And we don't want to be discharging raw sewage into receiving waters. And so we really need to treat it before that happens to really make sure we're mitigating environmental impacts. And then how wastewater differs from water quality, right? A couple things. We're more concerned with nutrient removal. And part of the reason why is because we don't want those nutrients causing eutrophication in our receiving waters. We have a focus on parameters like TSS and BOD. So these are the ones that are a little bit more heavily regulated in wastewater. And we actually don't have to disinfect quite as rigorously. And so part of the reason for that is because humans are probably not consuming your treated wastewater unless it is a water recycling plant, and then that's a different matter. But we don't have to disinfect as rigorously because receiving waters can stand a little bit of a pathogenic load. And so that's important as well. So you'll notice that when we start to talk, disinfection looks a little bit different when it comes to wastewater. And then lastly, this is kind of a summary side of what's coming up for the rest of the semester in terms of wastewater. So wastewater treatment, we normally have 5 steps. We have what we call preliminary treatment, primary treatment, secondary treatment, tertiary treatment, and then disinfection. And so generally what happens is this is the process flow diagram. We don't have to have everything here. But below it are some examples of some technologies that are included within each of these bins, so to speak. So we're going to start by talking about preliminary treatment, things like screening, grinders, grease interceptors, fun stuff. And then we're going to talk a lot more in detail about things like sludge reactors and bioreactors, because that's really where wastewater treatment differs. So just kind of save a snapshot of this screen. These are some of the things that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the semester. And in class, we will talk specifically about wastewater quality parameters.